Okay, so we've been thinking in the previous videos about preparing as a facilitator to practice your craft. Whether you're an internal or an external, you're going to need to contract with with your client. You're going to have to think about issues around what kind of intervention is this. I think it's about time though that we got onto the sharp end of facilitation in practice, and that is as we approach actually being in the room, in a workshop, in a session with participants. Maybe they're employed by your client. And as we approach this, I want to think about this in three ways, the three Ds: design, dynamics, and delivery. I'm going to start in this video thinking very simply about design of the experience that you're about to have, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a learning experience for everyone, including you, the facilitator. And it may be that you're going to be a process facilitator. You're simply guiding a group of people who are experts in their own field to some kind of decision, to some kind of conclusion. You're not making any particular input other than guiding them through the day or however long you have. It may be, though, that you're going to be facilitating as a trainer, where there is a certain amount of content as well as process that you want them to go away with, and you've got some of that you want to deliver, but not in a strictly directive way where they're passive and you're the only one that's active in the process. So you want to have some kind of plan, some kind of design has to go into this so that it's a great experience and people remember. Because, there's an old adage: I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So we want the people in the workshop to be actually doing something. And I always try and ask myself, what are they going to be doing? Because I don't just want them to be listening to me all the time. So when we're planning, when we're designing, it always goes back to objectives that you've agreed, that you've contracted with your client. What's the point of this? What are the outcomes we're aiming for? What do we want to achieve at the end of this half day, 2 days, week, whatever it is we have together? How am I going to design it so that we have a good chance of achieving our objectives? Now, the objectives might be X, Y, and Z must be achieved. We've got to get to these points by the end of our session. People must have learned how to do this in a kind of technical learning way. But it may also be a lot more open-ended, that this session is to explore and to grow our awareness of, to grow a deeper understanding of. It may be that the purpose of the session is simply to come to a point where we know what we're going to do next. And so your design is going to vary according to what the objectives are. And you may find that in the course of your design, you actually think, well, the time that we think this is going to take to be achieved just isn't enough. I'm going to have to go back to the client and say, look, I think this needs to be 2 days rather than 1 day. Or we'll do a day and then we'll have a 3-week gap and come back a week later to finish it off on the basis of what they've tried out in the intervening time. Some recontracting, in other words, is going to have to take place. When you're thinking about design, when you're thinking about planning a learned experience, a workshop, it's worth to think in terms of interactive. It's not them passive, you active. It's interactive. And you're going to take your lead, not just from what you've prepared, but from what they come up with. As they think about their experiences, as they share their knowledge, you need to be genuinely interested in what they're saying, in their lives, in them, in their experiences, and that is always going to stand you in good stead. There's no better advice I could give than for you to be genuinely interested in the participants and what they're saying, because if you are, questions will follow, questions will flow. So build into your plan, build into your design plenty of opportunity for them to discuss amongst themselves and then share with the whole group their experiences. To have an experience in the workshop, yes. To respond to questions you give them or scenarios you explore, issues that you want to get to grips with, listening to that, but also as they reflect on their real life experiences in the workplace or in any other part of life. And this is sometimes called experiential learning. And the best way to describe it is using Kolb's learning cycle, Kolb, David Kolb, his learning cycle. And it stood me in good stead for, it must be well over 30 years, when I've always had in the forefront of my mind, when I'm designing or even delivering in the workshop, what will they be doing? What's the experience they're going to be having? And the learning cycle, if you imagine 4 squares, it begins with experience. They have an experience or they reflect on experience. So the second part is reflection, having an experience and reflecting on it, asking what happened there? What was that all about? What did I feel? What did I experience? What do other people say about that? What was the outcome? And as a result, they come to some conclusions. This is the third step. Principles are arrived at. And you can help people with that because you'll have some up your back sleeve. You know the answer in the back of the book, but you'll be listening to them so that it's phrased and it's worded in ways that make sense to them. But you're content that you can add and provoke and prod with your questioning so that the truths or the principles that you want to come out do so if it's a training course. And then the fourth one is applying. Real learning hasn't happened unless it's applied. It's just head knowledge until someone then applies it to the next experience, which, by the way, may be in your workshop, or it may be the day after the workshop or in the intervening months that follow before you next meet the people. They're going to have an opportunity to apply fresh learning, different perspectives, different ways of doing things, different ways of trying and approaching situations that they've been discussing in your workshop. So application is all important. That leads on to the next experience. And so the learning cycle is really a spiral. It goes on and on. You can go around it several times during the day, and it's also going on in their field of work, but they always need time to come back, built in, to reflect on what's happening. And that's often the bit that's missing. And so when you're planning the workshop, you need to say, how long is that going to take? If they've got this activity to do, what's the length of that? And by the way, I would never use an activity that I've never experienced and delivered before, because you're really plucking at straws. You're just grasping at straws, thinking, I think that'll take 15 minutes. Maybe it'll take 25 minutes. Maybe it'll take an hour. It all depends on how much comes out of it. It may be a very rich experience for some, especially then when they come to reflect on it. How long am I going to leave for that activity? Are they going to do that in their small groups? Are they going to do that as a whole group? How are we going to handle that reflection? And the principles, are they going to bring that forward onto a flip chart? Or are they going to speak it out and I capture it? Or do we just discuss it? All of these things need to be built into the design, into your planning, and it all needs to be timed out. And very often facilitators have a kind of facilitator's plan where they know the timings for each activity and they know any accessories or notes or guides that they're going to use for each of those sessions. But they're always bearing in mind activities, experiences, time for reflection and feedback, principles and input from you or members of the group. So you see how using that very simple Kolb's learning cycle can really help you go around experience, reflection, principles and application. And that goes right through to the end of the day, where you make sure you build in at the end of the day another short time for reflection about the whole day. What have you learned? What are you taking away? What are you going to stop doing? What are you going to start doing? What might you continue doing because you're already doing that brilliantly well? What's going to be different as a result of today? What are you going to do? Where are you now? You're kind of coaching the whole group, and sometimes individuals, if they're not all in the same place. You might have a special word for individuals. That's the kind of thing you can only do if you are genuinely interested, as I said at the outset, if you're genuinely interested in them as individuals, and it will really help you in your design and your planning. Now, in the next video, what I'd like to do is get into the dynamics when you're actually in the room. You've done your planning, you've done your design, but that's not going to be worth anything unless you're able to develop that rapport, that dynamic, and manage the whole learning experience. So we'll look at that next time in the following video. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.